Hello and welcome to Two Drink Maximum, the show over two drinks and nothing else. I am your host, Chase Baxter.
I'm your other host, Shane Byerly.
We have a really great show today. We have a very gamified show today is what I'll call it. We're joined today by Peter J. Wacks, filmmaker, author, creator, game creator, and just all-around savant of everything, it seems. Welcome to the show, Peter.
Thanks. It's fun to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us. Yeah, that's right. So as we generally like to start the show, tell us, what are we drinking today, and why is it a drink that you like?
Okay, so we're drinking a vodka tonic, vodka and seltzer water, really. With a piece of lemon that you got just right. And the reason that we're drinking it is because when I was 13 years old, I was in Russia with my grandfather. And I have this crazy memory of, we left Leningrad, we went down to the small village where another one of the scientists that worked with him lived, called Gachina. And there's this huge dinner and all these people are having fun, and somebody puts vodka in front of me, a shot of vodka.
At 13 years old.
At 13 years old. And my granddad's like, no. And so they pour some seltzer water in and they go, yes. He's 13. It's vodka. This is Russia.
Right.
And so I had my first vodka at 13 in Russia in this little village. And I don't remember much past that because I was 13. It was vodka, but I've always been prone to the drink ever since then.
That's very cool. Well, cheers, fellas.
Right.
Thank you again so much for coming.
That's the place to try vodka.
We'll give it a try. It is very hot today, so hopefully this is
Brisk and refreshing.
It's refreshing as I'd hoped it would be. Yes, that's excellent. So yeah, as Chase alluded to, I mean, God, you are a man who wears many, many hats, but
Do everything.
One of the most recent things that you've been working on is you are creating a game, and the game seems a little bit, for somebody who's not aware of it, it seems a little bit hard to describe. So can you kind of walk us through, like, what is the game that you're designing?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. It actually ties to the past. It's a 30-year story for me.
Yeah.
So I played Magic the Gathering when I was a kid, and it was just fresh out, like 93, 94.
Is this post-vodka or pre-vodka?
This was barely post-vodka
that
I was playing Magic the Gathering. And I had a large portion of my collection stolen when I was a kid.
Oh, no.
And so part of game design for me has always been trying to crack that code of how do you stop a collection from getting stolen? How do you protect a kid from bullies, from whoever is going to take these cards, and figure out a way to, replace them or whatever. And so there's two sides to this game that I'm creating. One is the very realistic, kind of practical side of having solved that problem. And the other is just a hella fun sandbox that I've been wanting to play in for a while. Now I've done games before, like Cyberpunk, and it was really well noted for being a storyline based, and it felt like you're actually playing the role-playing game when you're playing this card game. And so I kind of built on those ideas, and I wanted to create a system so that you weren't playing a game, but so that there's card logic when you're playing tabletop with these cards, or whether you're playing on the computer. And the idea is that logic has different games that it can play. So if your favorite game is Monopoly, then there's an asset control version of the game that can be played with those. If you don't like competitive games, if you're a cooperative player, well, there's one where you and the other player can actually work together towards a common goal, like, infinite games, because games are for more than just, hardcore gamers. It should be for everybody.
Sure, absolutely.
I wanted to make a sandbox that was fun for everybody. And so I did that, and then I was thinking, well, we've got all these different formats, a really good storyline that would work with that, which, the love of the deep story, the love of deep characters and structure comes from some of my time as a novelist and writing. So I started working out a kind of multiverse sandbox, but not the way that Marvel Cinematic Universe does it or DC. I wanted to have something that was inclusive to any intellectual property that anybody wanted to bring in. So we've designed a storyline that uses a whole bunch of other different intellectual properties as the basis that can be built on. And some of those are licenses, some of them are mine, some of them are public domain. But as you get more and more fandoms, you can just start socketing into these other stories, because inside of this storyline, there's room for high fantasy. There's room for science fiction. There's room for real world personalities. There's, I'm planning a year where we license a bunch of like rock stars and stuff and have Battle of the Bands as one of the formats.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Like, right? Just a lot of fun like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of how the pieces fit together. I've designed some cool tech that make it so that physical cards are not stealable anymore.
Sure.
And then this fun storyline so that anybody can have storylines that they like, and then the different formats that go around those card behaviors so that you can play different games that you like.
Right, exactly. That's pretty neat. Now, when you're saying that these digital cards that can't be stolen anymore, are you referring to like using NFT technology? Is that
just articulate the structure of the game you're building a little bit. You've got a physical card component, and you have the digital,
and you have to create a one-to-one relationship between them. And so the funny thing is, I know that normally we talk about the present first and then go back and talk about the past later,
Sure,
but I got to dive into the past a
Let's
little bit.
do it. Absolutely.
So I had this process where you inject flakes of chrome into ink, and there many printers can do it. Transcontinental was the first one that did it with me. Mixing the flakes of chrome in with the ink, it creates a randomized pattern inside of the ink as something prints. So you can have 2 print-ups of the same picture.
Right.
And the little flakes will actually provide a different pattern inside of that.
Right.
It's like a baked-in QR code.
Kind of, yeah, exactly. I was calling them fingerprints at the time, right?
Yeah.
And so you have these QR codes, these fingerprints that you take a scan of it, and it's completely unique for every single card that ever gets printed.
Yeah.
And then you combine that with a digital record that says, well, this is the thing. Now, in today's world, that would be an NFT.
Right.
But I did this 20 years ago with Cyberpunk.
Right.
So the running joke around the office is that I made NFTs that actually used proof of consensus between retailers to prove a record.
Yeah.
With glitter and 14.4 modems. And so
It's just gotten more complicated from there.
but the tech is so much better. Like I've been baking this idea for 20 years, and now the tech's caught up. I'm like, wait till everybody sees what we can do.
So you're the James Cameron of card games, is what you're saying.
There's not going to be an Avatar out of me. Sorry, not an Avatar fan. It's really cool. It's invisible to the human eye. It can't be intercepted the way that like NFC or RFID can. It connects to an NFT, queries against a blockchain. If you are the owner of the card, somebody steals it, you can flag it as lost. You can flag it as stolen, at which point we can reprint it because we can change the circulation record to say this is a stolen card. Somebody else tries to sell it.
Right. You can just move on. Right. You can essentially digitally take it out of circulation.
Exactly.
And replace
Print
it.
a new one, and boom, the kid's collection is made whole again.
Right. That's incredible. Yeah. That
is awesome.
What a novel idea for, I mean, obviously that idea of cards getting stolen, right, is something that was so imprinted on you that it's really cool that you've come up with a way that won't happen again to anybody who plays the game. So I do want to back up for just a second because you mentioned Cyberpunk. So Cyberpunk is a game for folks that don't know is I mean multiple award-winning game that you created back 20 years ago, right?
I created the collectible card game. Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. The original universe was based off of what, a series of graphic novels, or
actually a role-playing game created by Mike Pondsmith and Argyle Sorian Games, and then I springboarded off of that and worked with him, created the collectible card game, introduced new lore, came up with this card game. And I mean, the RPG had been kind of waning a little bit. Sure. He hadn't put out his new edition for a number of years, and he finally did.
Right.
But yeah, it's very much, it's cyberpunk. It's that genre, that entire genre of like William Gibson or Blade Runner or that
Philip
near
K. Dick,
dark
all that good stuff.
future. Yeah, exactly. We're kind of actually living in it right now.
Wonderful dystopia that we all currently exist in.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, that's really cool. So did you approach him just as a fan, or like, I think this would be a cool thing to make a card game with, or did you know him beforehand? How did you guys get connected?
Yeah, no, me and a friend of mine who had personal money to throw at it, put some money down. I started working on a design. We kind of crafted it, polished it a little, and we had no clue. We were young 20-somethings, right? So we hired a lawyer and said, could you talk to these people? And he actually said, yes, come talk to me. And part of it was, he was like, you approached me correctly. You hired a lawyer. You had a very professional, and I know that you're just kids, but you're doing it the right way. So let's take a look at this game.
Yeah.
And then we played the game, and he was just mind blown.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, again, doing just a little bit of research before the show, like, it seems the game is currently out of print, right? It's hard to get your hands on a new set. but all over Reddit, people are like desperate to get used cards, and they talk about how to play. And it's like, it seems like once people get the hang of the game, it becomes very addicting and fun for them. So
it is. For 20 years, I have been getting like emails and private messages and stuff asking for like rules clarifications, or if I know where some cards are, or do I know which card this is because they're missing it from their set, and just random things.
And
that's funny.
That brings up the thought for me, like when you're beginning the process of creating a game, like what are your like top 3 priorities for like what makes a good game for you?
You have to start with experience. It really, when you're creating a game, it's a pact with the player to tell a great story.
Sure.
And even Angry Birds, you're telling a little story there. You're flipping a slingshot back because there's some pigs you got to get rid of. Right?
Exactly. It's a simple story, but it's a story nonetheless.
They found a movie in that one somehow. So
exactly. Which, by the way, the new Twisted Metal series, not something I ever thought would actually make a good show, but it's good. Like
they caught a good vibe on it. They found it.
Yeah, they really did.
They did. But yeah, so it's that experience. It's that shared storytelling. It's what do I want to feel when I'm playing a game, and how can I start to create an architecture that is going to allow those set of feelings to exist. And it goes beyond just fun. It's everybody wants to have fun when you're playing a game, but you also want to be challenged. You want to be locked into certain experiences. And so that is like the number one thing.
Sure.
After that, I start to work on narrative. I start to work on characterization. Give somebody a character that they love, and they're in forever. I know I have my favorite characters in novels that I have read 20-something books just because I want to know what happens with that character next. And so, so especially in this format of storytelling, a game where they get to influence what happens to that character, it's important to get that right.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a level of trust on the user's point that you know what you're doing, and that you're going to lead them down and maybe not a happy conclusion, but a satisfying conclusion.
Exactly. Satisfying is the most important thing. There's a promise of a premise that you set up at the beginning, and you have to fulfill that promise, even if it's not the conclusion they want, even if it's not a happy one. You have to hit that promise of the premise. Otherwise, what was the point?
Right, exactly. Why would I invest my time in playing this game? Yeah,
exactly.
And just the ability to beat a game. There are lots of games that exist in the universe that are deliberately impossible for you to solve, and that has its own level of fun as you do it, but also like you want that payoff here and there. Like you want to level up or get past that one boss that you can't stand. So making something leveled and tiered enough that it requires a growth of skill for the player is also probably important, I would guess.
Yeah,
it is. Although that comes a little bit later. So once you get past those first 3 things, you have an architecture, you have kind of like a framework that you're building on.
Sure.
But the same way that you can kind of know what a house is going to look like from the foundation, you don't know what that house is actually going to look like. You just know the shape of it, right? Like where the rooms are going to be. And so with the game architecture, at least the way that I build them, I get that set of feelings off of those 3 things. And then I start to head towards, I need to put up this wall. Okay, you know what? A player's going to run right out into the yard and trip in the garden. So I'm going to put this wall up and maybe a window here, and start to get that refinement in that locks in the actual journey.
Yeah, I imagine that is that the more fun part than just kind of the basic foundation of it, just kind of.
Interestingly, for me, no. I'm a volcano when it comes to initial creation.
Sure.
And I love polishing. But the middle bits, like my novels, first draft, and then I have to put it away for 6 months, and then I can start to polish it.
Yeah.
But it's the middle bits that are the harder part for me. So for me, it's definitely the initial inception. And then going back, and especially with thematic stuff, like finding little rules that I can tweak that enforce a story or that help make that theme just nailed.
Yeah.
That's a lot of fun to do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at what point, or are you one of those folks that it never feels that way? At what point when you're designing a game do you feel like it's done? It's I've got it. It's finished.
So I think it was H.G. Wells that every time one of his books was released from a publisher to go to a new publisher, would actually do another pass on it.
Yeah.
So like if you get the time machine from this publisher versus that publisher, they'll actually have significant differences in
that's cool.
the text.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I do have that. Like, but there's also deadlines, and you have to learn to just let go sometimes, right?
Exactly. And kind of, it's like,
Tweak a
okay.
thing to death.
I guess for me, the big thing there is find the point where I'm not going to have to errata things after the game releases, and then it's good to go, even if there are things that I think I could make better.
Sure.
Know that it's stable enough that I'm not going to have to change things after the fact.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't need to be like a desperate update pack that, it makes clarifies some rules that weren't previously clarified or whatever. Yeah.
Right.
What's that, without naming any names, especially because Cyberpunk was such a huge phenomenon and it was a thing. Like, what was the weirdest email that you've gotten where it's like, whoa, you were taking this way too seriously? Like, just, you're not even having fun with this game. Come on.
Oh yeah. Okay. So
Sounds like there are a few.
there are a couple. I think the weirdest one that I got was about so Cyberpunk we put out 20 years ago, and it was the first edition was Cyberpunk 2013, and the second one was Cyberpunk 2020. Right. So we're past the benchmark, right?
Yeah.
You did it.
But inside of the role-playing game, there's an era leading up to 2023 where everything's like really crazy and intense. And I got an email that went super deep into that lore versus the characters that the TCG had introduced, and asking about how some of those things kind of intermeshed and overlapped. And I hats off to the amount of knowledge that person had and the amount of research they were able to put in, but they took it past the level that I was able to really be helpful in getting their answer, especially with something that format bounces like Cyberpunk does.
Yeah.
You've gone from RPG to the Netrunner TCG to mine the Cyberpunk TCG, and then of course over to the video game, and now you have the re-release which resets all of the canon in 2077 instead of like, it's just, there's a lot of moving parts there, right?
Yeah. You want it to make sense when you, as a fan of anything, when you invest that much time and energy into it, you want it to make sense in your head. And if you're that level of fan, and you can get access to those creators, you want to make sure that you're on the right track and that your investment's being rewarded. But I imagine that people like yourself, like George R. R. Martin, like George Lucas, who have created these massive universes that are popular. At a certain point, there's like one day where you're just like, you know what, man? I don't know. The character does this.
Because it was fun.
I don't know. Yeah, it's because it was fun. That's why. Because I don't know. I like the color blue. That's why he has a blue lightsaber. Whatever. Like
it's easier on me with Cyberpunk anyway. It was just because I had all of the RPG to already work with story-wise. So I was just integrating characters. But with this new build, oh yeah, it's a monster. So I'm trying to figure out how characters from Valiant Comics are going to integrate with, because that announcement is happening later this month.
Oh,
which
nice.
For you listeners will have been.
This is an announcement from the future to the past.
From the future to the
exactly.
past. Right. Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure out how to integrate Valiant Comics, which is a great superhero universe, with a high fantasy, a dystopian. We're actually using my novel Solar Singularity as our dystopian kickoff point, but then we also have a second dystopian one called Last Cities of Earth, which is beautiful, amazing series of paintings that this artist Jeff Sturgeon did. He brushes aluminum and it brings his paintings, gives them this like texture, this three-dimensionality that's just mind-blowing. And he did this series of paintings. It's like 300 years, 400 years after the eruption of Yellowstone, and humanity has managed to get all of the cities up into the clouds on like anti-grav plates and stuff.
Wow.
So it's these like sci-fi paintings of all of these iconic cities, London, Tokyo, like there's London floating up within a lightning storm, but there's Big Ben, and like it's really cool stuff. So I'm trying to figure out how to integrate the storylines across these universes in a way that makes sense and is really, really true to the characters of each of the universes. And this is where it's getting into that eye for detail you're talking about, because just because characters from universe A are going to come play and then get reset into their universe without a continuity break, you still got to be true to those characters.
I guess the current working title is Xfinitum, which sounds really cool. The X at the front makes it sound exciting and dynamic and fun.
So it makes it sound like technology that doesn't exist yet, which this game kind of is, right? Which is really cool.
How did we arrive at that name?
So I was starting with the infinite multiverse in the story and trying to work away from titles that are more generic, that would be not generic, that would be better suited for a singular story, like a novel title or something like that.
Sure.
So I was looking for something to describe the universe, and I was looking for this multiverse idea, because you have the framework is that you have this species that is in the oldest part of the multiverse. So the oldest universe in all of the universes. And they've been watching all of the other species, all of the other universes, and they've realized that you can actually break it down to math and calculate exactly when a species will go extinct. And so they start folding n-dimensional space and creating bridges across the multiverse to get things like magic interacting with science, to see if they can find new variables to try to change this extinction math.
Right.
So
And-
the X makes more sense if it's truly a
Right?
variable.
Well, but it actually started as infinitum. And then our lawyer said, no, you're going to have copyright issues. So I was like, well, what about exfinitum? It's not a real word.
Yeah, yeah.
So, so we landed on exfinitum for the infinite, but the X factor and the right, it all just kind of fit together. So
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, this game sounds really exciting because it's what I think is pretty novel about it, at least as far as I understand it, is that it's nearly future proof, right? Because you're involving so many universes and because there's a digital and a physical element to it, it sounds like within reason, there's almost no limit to what you can expand upon in the game. And so it's going to be a game that you can continue to play. So many, I think, a lot of video gamers, a lot of their complaints is that, especially for like gaming systems, PlayStation, whatever, you spend 60, 70, 80 bucks now on a game, you buy it and then you beat it and then it's done. And it's like, well, this is, how often am I going to replay this game? But if it's a game that is constantly evolving and you can make the game you can play the game in the way that you want, it sounds like a game that users are going to be excited to play for years and years to come. That's really cool.
Well, thank you. And and on that note, actually, the one other piece of it that I didn't mention before because it was going a little bit long, I actually designed a new language that structures how a card is built, and we're going to be training an AI model to go from plain speech into that language and back again.
Oh, wow.
The idea being that, let's say that I have my favorite character from my favorite universe that I follow as a fandom.
Sure.
Using Valiant Dr. Mirage.
Sure.
I love her. She's awesome. But I need to deal some direct damage for the deck that I want to build.
Right.
So this is a way that in the digital environment, the cards gain experience as they get play. Then a player can burn that experience and say, I would like to add this to my card. The language can then rebuild the card, adding in that piece of what the user wants, what the player wants, that end piece to be. And then, of course, with the other tech, we can just reprint it and issue the new one to them.
Yeah,
Right, exactly.
You're making a game that can evolve on its own as people play. That's pretty
Exactly.
awesome.
I still hope, though, that we find a way to work the chrome and glitter into the new tech as well. I mean, it's old school, but it's still cool, though.
There's never enough chrome and glitter.
Yeah.
In talking about working on the fine details, you do all this work, all this effort to build a narrative and to build a structure of play and to build a format of play. But I know one thing gamers and players in the world love to do is try and find a way to break the game. That is like its whole own passion online of people finding glitches or whatever, hacks, speed runs, anything. So how do you break proof a game?
Well, by being really good at breaking games. There was a funny story where our technology guy, Ashton, who's building out our alpha environment right now, put it in front of me, and within 3 seconds, I had already found like 2 bugs. So it'd be really good at finding the bugs, but you have to translate that to tabletop. It's not just
Right.
It's not just in the digital environment finding bugs, but you have to find that same how do I break this? How do I min max it? How do I rules lawyer it until? Sorry, all you lawyers, until it's broken.
Yeah.
And that's part of why I actually landed where I did with the idea of having a card behavior system.
Sure.
It's going to allow cards to ebb and flow between the different games with different power levels. So you can go ahead and you can break this in this format.
Sure.
Doesn't mean it's going to stay broken in a different game.
Right, exactly. Yeah, because the rules apply in this scenario, the way you're playing the game does not mean that it's going to be the same pitfall in a different
Exactly.
way, right? In the Battle of the Bands, right? this might break, but when we play it in the Valiant universe or whatever, right? It's like, it's going to be,
Yeah, it'll be a lot more easily dealt with.
Yeah, exactly. That's cool. God, I mean, the amount of lateral thinking that I have to imagine that you have to employ at all times to make sure that you're staying ahead of this has got to be quite the challenge.
I use my iPad as a memo notebook, so I have like notes, right? And I have just pages after pages after pages. I have the iPad pencil, so I actually handwrite it.
Yeah.
And I just have pages and pages and pages on all this stuff. And then, of course, I have to go get it into spreadsheets and get into things that everybody else can work with. And it also helps. I have a really killer team that is putting a lot of hard work into helping me get that lateral thinking to happen.
Yeah. And of course, on the nights where things aren't really working out and, you feel a little stressed, that's what Vodka Tonics are for. Right?
Exactly.
And speaking of which, we are now looking at 3 empty glasses. So we're going to take a real quick break. We're going to refill ourselves and we'll be back in just a moment.
Be right back.
Chase and I might be new to the podcast game, but we do know enough that the best podcast should be recorded in an environment that really kind of spurs your creativity. And we're lucky enough to record our podcast in the Muse Rooms, which is a creative co-working shared space that we are proud to have as a sponsor, and we could not be more excited.
Yeah, you can check out the Muse Rooms online to learn more about their services and the spaces they have here. Lots of really great stuff. That is themuserooms.com. That's M-U-S-E for Muse. You can also check them out on Instagram at the Muse Rooms. But have a look at it. There's tons of great amenities. It's a really wonderful environment, like you said, and it just goes a long way in making our show amazing.
Agreed. We couldn't be happier, and we think you might be too. So please check out the Muse Rooms, and we will see you there.
Yeah, and now for part 2.
We are back with Peter J. Wacks. We've got full glasses here. We're ready to rock and roll.
We do.
So like I said, in order to talk about the present, we got to talk about your past. You've had quite an interesting one. I mean, you've lived internationally for quite some time, it seems like, and you've kind of gone all over the world. So 13, you're in Russia, and you're with your grandfather, right, who was a nuclear physicist?
Absolutely.
Wow, that's incredible. So, I mean, what was that like? I mean, being so young and learning all of those different cultures.
Well, it was amazing. It was eye-opening. It was weird at times. So I would go over from age 8 until 18. I would go with my granddad over to Europe every summer.
Okay.
I would spend 3, 4, sometimes 5 months there. And he was a professor emeritus at the University of Arizona, and he would take grad students and he would put them in jobs with different companies around Europe. And so I just got to go hang all over Europe. And we usually posted out of Germany, but because of that, I mean, I lived there. I would come back to the States with a little bit of a German accent, and then I would get to Germany with a little bit of an American accent. It just kind of was this rolling thing, right? And so getting to experience culture like that, it's different. I wish that I had better words for it. As a writer, I'm supposed to have better words for it, but it really is something where, okay, so here's an example. I'm a kid. I'm not even a tween yet, right? I can hop on a train. I can go from Germany to Italy across multiple national borders, play soccer with my friends down in Italy who I do not speak any Italian and they do not speak any English, but we're best buddies because we play soccer together. And then I'm home for dinner in Germany.
Yeah.
Doesn't happen here.
No, you can't do that. Maybe in like Vermont, Connecticut, you can just kind of those 2 states, something like that. But yeah, especially if you live in the Southwest. I mean, Arizona, Texas, New Mexico, you're not crossing state lines like that. That's not happening.
It's never getting out of Texas.
Yeah.
Really isn't. And that was a big part of it, like learning people and learning to be open. In America, we're all American and we're the insiders, right? And we don't get to be the outsiders unless we are part of a non-privileged class, at which point supposedly we're Americans first and then we're non-privileged second. But that lack of privilege does teach some of us outsiders, but not others. And growing up in Europe, I was always the outsider. And so it just teaches you a different context around everything. It's not good or bad. It's just different. You see
You weren't
the
raised
world.
with the good old American exceptionalism concept that exists out here of like we're default the most amazing people in the world just because America.
Yeah, I would mostly speak German while I was over there. I would avoid the American English because that actually got you more frowns and pushaways in the 90s. Yeah, absolutely.
It's interesting, because I've always heard, and I can't you would obviously know better than I would, but I've always heard that in France, if you attempt to speak French and it's not perfect, they will jump all over you. But in Germany, if you can speak like one word of German, they're like, you are doing so great. That's so wonderful. Thank you for trying so much. But is that not the case?
Oh, no, that's so the case. That's so the case.
Okay.
But France is also a special case. And, French listeners, sorry, I'm going to tell you this. In Paris, when I was a teenager, I figured out how to hack France.
Oh.
How do we hack France?
Well, the first thing is to understand that the only thing you can do that's worse than speaking American English in France is speaking German.
Oh, no.
A little bit of history, a little bit of history.
God, you were doubly in trouble there.
I was. So I would go in places and I would try to be like, je parle, and try to get them to speak, but then they would quickly outstrip and then there would be no English because I knew just enough French. So somewhere in the end, this was like, I want to call it precocious, but I was a snot.
Yeah,
I totally was. So I would go in and I would just be like, this is the one place where I'm going to actually play the American card and say, "Jes parles un petit François?" They'd be like, no, please, I speak English.
Yeah.
So
Please don't do that to me again.
Yeah, right. Like
I'm insulted.
who does that, right? Right.
Yeah.
Well, an American. An idiot abroad, as Mark Twain.
Yeah. But at the same time, you did it for a purpose, right? Now, I mean, you don't just speak German, right? You speak a whole number of languages.
Spoke.
Wow.
I haven't used them in so long.
It is a use it or lose it thing.
It is. And you get lucky in some instances, like, Dutch is basically German plus English with a coughing fit. Like will is German for will, or will is Dutch.
There you go.
So it's just
I accidentally speak a little Dutch every morning when I wake up. and clean
exactly.
my-
Yeah.
Exactly.
It does. It feels a little more flat. Like
such an international man. But the other thing is like the big hack on French. If you speak English and German, is that all of the short words in English come from German and all of the long words come from French.
Oh, interesting.
So you can start to kind of back hack that and understand that like room, zimmer. Okay, that's German. Chamber, chambre. Okay, that's French, right? The longer word for a room is, of course, the French one.
Yeah.
But you can also back hack that ATION. Any word that ends in ATION in English as a longer word has a parallel in French. So aviation is aviation.
Right.
So
You can just
you
start
can
saying
start to
those
hack
words when you
that.
travel.
Right. And so now all of a sudden you have a functional vocabulary of over 4,000 words and you're just picking up all the pieces that connect them.
That's really
And
cool.
A lot of languages work like that together.
Yeah.
And as a teenager, it was easy. I've lost the art. I spent way too long not doing it.
Sure.
But even in speaking multiple languages, I was actually always kind of not the best in my family at the languages. I spoke a handful, like maybe 4 or 5, and my mom, I think, speaks like 8 or 9. My uncle's around the same with 10 or so.
Wow, good
My
Lord.
granddad spoke over 20.
Wow.
It was insane.
There is like a waterfall effect of learning languages of people that stick with it and start like, because your brain just picks up on like, oh, this is what this means, and you start drawing references and make parallels inside your mind and jump between the languages.
Yeah.
Those are the people that really trip me out, is the people that can shift, even just like Spanglish, dropping
And go
between
back
two
and
language
forth, yeah.
instantly. Like that's crazy. My brain cannot do that.
Yeah. It's cool when you hear it though. I like there was a girl that I dated in early high school that she was French Canadian. Her mom was French Canadian, and occasionally I'd be over at their house and she would start arguing with her mom, and they would just weave in and out of French Canadian. I'm like,
That's so awesome.
I'm scared, but I'm also kind of excited by
I
this.
think
This is
every
cool.
time
Yeah.
they speak French, they're talking about me.
Yeah, exactly. Learning all those different languages, especially growing up, did that influence you? I mean, when you started to write, I mean, was that kind of did you want to focus on stories where you could use different languages or invent your own language?
I actually started writing before I started learning the other languages.
Oh,
Really?
interesting.
My
Okay.
first short story I wrote when I was 6.
Wow.
Nice.
Okay.
I was an extra with a handful of speaking lines on Revenge of the Nerds.
Nice. Hey.
And
You're in a Stone Cold classic.
Right?
right. Yes, but as a little kid, set hours, oh my God.
yeah.
So hard, so
Yeah.
hard. And I was having meltdowns, and I went to my mom and I was like, you know what? I don't want to act. I want to tell the stories instead. And so I
Yeah.
started telling the bedtime stories. And then before my 7th birthday, I wrote my first short story, which I still know it.
Oh,
It's
what was the
it
title?
wasn't a very long, it didn't have a title.
Okay.
But there once was a man named Bob. Bob had a very bad day, and then the world blew up. I guess his bad day didn't matter.
That is
yes.
That was
doubly
my first
bad day
story
for
at
Bob.
6.
The Hemingway style
Right.
of writing. I
Very
like
epic.
it. Yeah.
You've already touched on some sci-fi there with the world-ending mechanism going on, so that was a
Exactly.
natural course for you.
And apparently I've always been into the dark, like darker fiction. So
The dark stuff. Yeah, exactly.
People named Bob.
Well, I mean, look, no need to apologize for it. It obviously has worked out for you. You have a whole number of published novels. I mean, you've even written some novels in some previously established universes, right? Predator, and it looks like
Yes.
Heroes, and a couple of things. I mean, that's pretty cool that you've gotten to touch on that stuff. Do you find that there's freedom in working in a previously established universe, or do you much prefer like, no, I like my own universes a little bit better?
The only thing I don't like is ghostwriting, actually.
Sure.
I mean, maybe it's ego, but
Is that more prevalent than people would assume?
I've done it twice, and I'm not going to do it ever again.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I like both. So you get different things out of them. So Predator, the DNA of Predator was really fun to dive into, realizing like really thinking it through and being like, okay, this is a title fight. And it's not just, aliens versus predators and the deep canon that the deep fandom gets into. It's the more expansive fandom, right? So how could I speak to that audience?
Yeah.
And so I wanted to tell like the ultimate title fight. So it's like, what if we did a predator hunt in the middle of Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans?
Nice.
That's a title fight.
Yeah, hell yeah.
It seems like it would be more constricting, but there's freedom if you are willing to embrace the DNA and just run with it and have fun. And I personally think that's really cool, but I, of course, also love writing my own stories.
Yeah.
I'm doing all the world building, I'm, polishing everything up.
Sure.
But it's an opportunity to create and to find new worlds when I'm telling my own stories. And I'm a cross-genre writer. I don't like to stick to long series. I don't like to, tell the same thing over and over again.
Sure.
So I like to bounce and find new worlds constantly.
Yeah, absolutely. That's got to be I have to imagine that's the more artistically freeing thing, because I'm sure at a certain point, people like Ian Fleming are like, my God, if I have to write another, if James Bond sleeps with another beautiful girl and shoots another Russian bad guy,
another sports car.
Dear God, I cannot do this anymore,
You think so, but finding characters that evolve and grow, that's the difference between like Bond and say Harry Dresden from the Dresden Files, which I'm not sure if you're
Passing familiarity. Yeah.
For everybody out there, he's basically a hard-boiled detective that also happens to be a magician, so can cast magic in modern day Chicago.
Right.
And watching that character arc and that type of character growth is an opportunity that you get when you get into the longer series that I actually think is pretty cool. Getting to play the long game that way is fun, and that's why there's one or two that I'm actually going to dive back into and write some longer form. It's just, ADHD. It takes me a little while to want to go back to a universe.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
well, for fans of yours who are listening, is there anything you are comfortable teasing with, like characters that you might want to get back into, or?
well, the Affinities universe, the High Magic universe, there's going to be more coming from that soon.
Nice.
And then I have a series of short stories that caught on for a while. Hummingbird and Inazuma. It's about a gunfighter from the West who lost his quick draw arm during the Civil War, went to China, started studying wushu and tai chi, got kind of a fake arm built with a bunch of acupuncture points that are connected to metal.
Yeah.
Like all right. So he can use his body to actually
Proto-robot.
right.
Yeah.
So combine him with a very Akira Kurosawa construct of and he's a 5'2". Important because I decided to flip the script a little bit.
Nice.
So we have the son of a Ronin samurai who's out on a vengeance quest to avenge his dad. The thing is, he was adopted by a British family and is Oxford educated and is 6 feet tall. So he's constantly standing out. And I took the two of them and I've decided I don't want to just do an action thing. This is actually going to be the two of them performing confidence games to catch criminals are how they're trying to get at the info that's going to help him on this quest for his father's honor, right?
That's really cool.
So yeah, I wanted to flip the action script a little bit. And
Yeah.
so I wrote a bunch of short stories in that universe, and I actually am 2/3 of the way done with the first novel in that universe.
Way to go.
Nice. Very cool. Man,
Nice.
that sounds really cool. Yeah, I mean, for
Downhill
me,
side.
You said the magic word for me because I'm for just to timestamp this episode a little bit. I'm one of the 10 people on planet Earth that still subscribes to Netflix DVD, and I'm in a dead sprint to watch every Kurosawa movie that he directed before they become very challenging to find on streaming services or whatever. And so anything that's kind of got a Kurosawa vibe, I'm like, I'm in on this.
Actually, stepping away from like the samurai stuff, and my favorite film is Dreams.
Yeah.
Of Kurosawa.
Yeah.
That impacted heavily. I watched that when I was 17.
Wow.
And that was when I started working on the plot structure for my first novel, was because of that movie. And that plot structure is the time travel novel that you can, 13 chapters, you can pull them apart, reorganize them in any order, and you still get build up conflict resolution, 3-act structure, clean. And that took me 15 years to write,
But it's cool though. Yeah, that sounds really. Yeah, Dreams is a fantastic film. Any movie where you cast Martin Scorsese as Vincent Van Gogh, you're headed in the right direction, right? Yeah. Oh man, that is so cool.
Let's circle back a little bit. Your grandfather was nuclear physicist, astrophysicist, correct?
nuclear physicist.
Nuclear physicist. So I'm curious, like, how much did you engage with him about that topic, or did he give you any kind of perspective that has sort of bled into your storytelling? Because he's very concerned with the little particles and parts that make up a grander reality.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
You do that with storytelling.
I do. He's a very formative part of it. My granddad, I was headed on a fast track to higher education when I was younger, and he encouraged me away from the sciences and into the arts. And so I think I was 6 years old when he would sit me on his 5 and 6. He would sit me on his knee and he read me Stranger in a Strange Land by Heinlein.
Wow.
And stuff like that. And so as I started to get into the writing and the storytelling, he really encouraged and coaxed that out of me. And of course I had a awesome mom, also supportive. She's a single mom working multiple jobs, but my granddad did end up adopting me and lived with him throughout high school, and he really formed that final polish on I am a creative. I am not going down the science path.
That's so interesting. Do you
But
wonder
a lot
why
of
he did-
conversations about science on the way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because was it just, I don't know, he deals with such a finite world and finite things, like perhaps opening up that broader, create whatever you want in this reality is something that he wanted to give to you.
It definitely is, but the universe is anything but finite, and the deeper we drill down into it, the more we realize we understand nothing.
Nothing, yeah.
Right? The new stuff about the telescope found some stuff out there that
Oh, it's not the Hubble. What is it?
the Webb.
The Webb
The Webb
telescope.
telescope.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
found
yeah.
straight up that is a clear as day, just question mark, a big curl and then a dot at the bottom. And it's like, oh, that's not ominous in space.
Right.
Yeah.
What's that? Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. That is the whole point of the telescope. We're trying to figure that out. Yeah.
But yeah, that and TARDIS regions of space, and we've discovered that warp drive is
Really?
a real thing. Yeah, that was like a year or two ago. Somebody
knew
found a warp
conceptually.
bubble.
Really?
Yeah, no, it was. I think it's called a Casimir cavity, or it's some type of cavity that's basically you're creating a null field in between two charged plates. And there was an anomaly that this scientist discovered, and because he was a Star Trek fan, and because he was into also studying
like, I
warp
gotta look at
drive,
this more.
it was like, wait a minute, is that what I think it is? And tiny little microscopic warp bubble. But what we can do small, we can eventually do big.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. Yeah.
So yeah.
That's amazing. The possibilities are quite literally endless. And that's, as we get more from that telescope too, it's becoming cool and it's becoming scary at the same time.
I mean, in theory, as we continue to move through all the whatever expanse of the universe and deal with interdimensionality stuff, we're going to run into a dimension that you've created at some point.
That's I hope so.
The Xfinitum universe is real, and it's one warp bubble away.
But that's the thing, right? Like we can see, what is it, like 4% of the universe or something ridiculously small.
Yeah.
And so much more is dark energy and dark matter. And it just, we are going to start to bump up against other stuff, and it's going to be freaky if we can observe it.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's all around us and we can't, which,
And
when you're
hopefully it
creeped
doesn't-
out like by our ghosts watching me in the shower, right? No, it's actually interdimensional beings who are in the dark matter around you.
Yeah.
And they absolutely are.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, 100%.
There have been a number of movies that have done like shots like this before, but I always find those like legitimately terrifying. Like I think there was a movie, the movie in and of itself wasn't all that great, but like I think it had Mandy Moore in it. It's a shark movie, right? Or whatever. And it's like her and like her friend are like in this dark ocean and they light this like underwater flare and it's pitch black. But then all of a sudden you realize there's like 4 great white sharks that were like
all around
a
them.
foot away from them. You're like, oh God.
That's what space is going to be like for us at some
Yeah,
point.
exactly. Although I will say, like, it's starting to settle now. But that first picture that we got from the Webb telescope, I was like, that's a Microsoft screensaver from 1995. That wasn't a real pic.
Hologram theory of the
I'm
universe.
kidding, of course. But it just that picture looked eerily familiar, and it was like, I feel like I've seen that before. Yeah.
So you're making this game, all this crazy stuff. What games are you playing right now?
For fun or research.
Yes, you're right. I still play Magic. Play Magic the Gathering. I don't play a lot of the new formats. I play mostly 93, 94, although their new Lord of the Rings expansion was a lot of fun. I play World of Warcraft. I play Genshin. I'm going to be diving into Diablo 4 here pretty soon because that looks amazing.
Yeah.
And I'm really looking forward to the new Dragon Age when it comes out. Like, really super looking forward to that. Love
Yeah.
Dragon Age. Great storytelling.
Yeah. When is that? That's coming out this year, right? A little bit later this year or no?
I think it's supposed to be this year.
Okay. Oh, yeah, like everything. It could
As
be pushed
games
now.
go. Yeah.
And it's on pause right now because I've been focused on Solar Singularity and on our dystopian universe, but I do plan to dive back into Cyberpunk at some point. 'Cause
Nice.
It's an awesome game,
I think there's another update coming out. Wait for that update.
right?
Yeah, the game's fun. I've been playing it too. Like it's a great game to play.
It is
and, yeah.
buggy to high heaven in some spots, but it's still fun.
Part of the charms, right? Yeah.
Right.
Well, if for people who are listening to this, perhaps who are maybe a little bit on the younger side, and they hear you talk about designing these games and they want to get inspired, what would be your advice, or what resources would you encourage people to start diving into if they want to kind of follow in your footsteps, either with writing or with game design? But game design, I mean, writing, you need a pen and paper, right? Game design, I feel like you need a little bit more than that.
Well, you do and you don't. I think both of them have the same core message behind them, and I can actually deliver it more easily from writing. With the number of Comic-Cons and writing seminars that I've spoken at, I've heard like literally a couple thousand different versions of how people got successful at writing or moved forward in their creative career. The only failure story that I've heard has always been exactly the same. I just stopped doing it. So persistence is key. Find blogs, find people who have worked their way up that are similar to the way that you want to do it or to what you're doing. Learn from what they've done, but be the first you. Don't follow someone else's path because that was their path, not yours.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's excellent advice. Yeah, because
amazing
so many
advice.
people, I think, latch on to, oh, this designer, this musician, this writer, I want to just do that. And it's like, but you're not that guy
You're
or
not.
that girl.
And actually, yeah, the one other piece that I'm going to throw out there, because I see a lot of people make this mistake. It's okay to be bad at it at first. You want to be bad at it at first because once you're bad at it, you slowly get good at it. If you try to absorb all the writing books or all the game design books or do it perfectly from the onset, you'll never learn what the bad habits you develop are. So be bad at it first.
Yeah. Suck at it for a while and then get better, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
The first draft, always garbage. Just accept
Yes.
it, but get it done.
Exactly. Yes. Finish the damn draft.
Yeah, exactly. That's funny. I mean, it sounds like weird advice to say from somebody who's reached a level of success that you have, but it's like, suck at it. Like, it's okay
Yeah.
to be shitty for a while, you know?
Oh, the number of things that I've been shitty at in order to be halfway decent at the number of things that I'm halfway decent at. Yeah, absolutely. And that it makes it more fun.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Well, the one thing you are certainly not is a shitty podcast guest.
Absolutely.
And we can-
Spectacular.
Yeah. Well, Peter, we need to wrap up here, but thank you so much for swinging by and donating your time. Like, this is great. Where can people people need to following your stuff so that they can keep up with your work and especially the game? Where's the best way for people to kind of follow the latest updates that you have?
I am so notoriously bad at actually staying on top of that because I'm busy making stuff.
Right.
You can find me on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it now.
Or if it's still around by the time this podcast
Yeah,
starting to
comes
take
out,
your name. You're going to have to watch out.
Right. PeterJWacks.net. The Xfinity website, although there's not a lot of info on it, I'm purposefully actually keeping that pretty close to the chest for now. But in a few months, there'll start to be. And then there'll start to be Discords that pop up and stuff like that. So
nice.
Yeah.
Very
So
cool.
stay tuned.
Well, when there's
the answer.
more, we'd love to have you back on the show, and we can kind of,
Sounds like a blast.
Yeah, absolutely. We'd love to have you. Well, we are going to wrap up here today.
All right, thank you for joining us, Peter. Excellent day, excellent conversations. If you want to keep up with us, our show, you can follow us on Instagram at 2drinkmaximum. Big thanks to the Muserooms for hosting our recording space today. You can follow them on Instagram at the Muserooms. That's MUSE for Muse. And yeah, check them out at their website, www.themuserooms.com. But thank you so much, Peter. This is an excellent show. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks guys for having me. It's been a blast.
Thanks. All right, everybody. We will see you next time.
Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.